Hi, Sean here. I'm going to go over some things for the violin. This occurs for the viola, cello, and bass that you might see in a classroom or see for yourself that you want to do to make sure your instrument is working correctly and set up correctly. So first we're going to go over just some basic setup things. And the first one is the bridge. Now, my bridge is actually not completely straight just right now. It looks pretty straight, but one thing we want to make sure is that the bridge is at a 90-degree angle on the back. So the bridge gets thinner at top, and we don't want it actually to just get thinner straight up. We want it to be flat on the back, and then the front curves back to it. Since I just replaced a string, it pulled the bridge a little bit forward. So how do we fix that? Now, this is a little bit easier to do on the violin and viola. Cello and bass, I would definitely loosen the strings, and if you don't feel comfortable with this, take it into a shop. And this goes for any of the things here. If you don't feel comfortable with it, don't test it out if you are not ready to experiment, and just bring it into a shop and let a trained professional do it. For the bridge, I need to straighten this out. And what we want to do is grab the bridge completely. So I'm going to straighten this out, but I'm making sure it doesn't really have anywhere to budge. And I'm just going to push the top part a little bit to straighten it out. That's a little bit better. Still could be slightly straighter. Now, sometimes bridges, after they get old, will start to warp. And if it warps, it's really difficult, if not impossible, to make it completely straight. And that might be the case that we need a new bridge, or it needs to be fixed and tried to be flattened, and that's something that a shop can do. Now, this is quite a bit straighter. Now you can see it's more at a 90-degree angle here, and then the front part curves back. Now, where should that bridge be? It should be equal distances on either side. And if you have a really fine ruler, you can measure that, or eyeball it is pretty close. But if you want to be exact, you want to do that. Where should it be this way? The traditional spot would be that the foot is right at this lower notch here. So the lower notch of the F-hole actually is in line with the middle of the bridge. Now, this can vary a bit and it's not exact, but that's something that you want to look for. So not actually in between the two lines, but more at that middle one there. This is something you can also check where the sound post is. So you can see the sound post right inside, right there, just behind the bridge, just making sure that it is straight up and down and a little behind the bridge. I would not mess with this unless you have experience with that. I would always bring this into a trained professional to adjust that. Another thing you can check is to see if the tailpiece is in the right spot. Again, this is a general idea and it can vary depending on the instrument. But a way you can check is that the string length, the after length, after the bridge, should be about 1/6 the length of the string. You could check that with a ruler, or what you can do is use Harmonics to check. And as long as your strings are in tune, what you can do is play third finger on one string. So if I play the D string third finger, harmonic, which is touching as light as possible, that note should relatively match the note behind the bridge. So it's fairly close. The bridge, because the notes were a little bit lower down here, that might mean that the tailpiece could be brought up a little bit to be closer to the bridge, so that would make the pitch slightly higher. If the pitch was too high, it could be brought back. Now that's adjusted with tightening or loosening this string, and again, that's something that I would leave to a trained professional to do, but that's a good way of checking it. If it's relatively close, that is fine, so I'm not going to be adjusting this. But if it's way low or really sharp, that's something that you might want to have adjusted to make the instrument sound nicer. So these final two things are about the chin rest and the pegs. So the chin rest, that can come loose in time. It's usually just held down between these two screws here. And you can see there's holes inside of them. So those holes allow you to tighten or loosen it. And you could use a paper clip. That's what I do when I don't have anything around. However, often the paper clip can bend, and if they push all the way through, you end up scratching the instrument. So you can buy chin rest keys, which have a really sturdy end to it, which you can use to tighten or loosen the chin rest. These are not too expensive, and I definitely suggest investing in them for your instrument or your classroom. Lastly, the pegs. If you have pegs that are sticking or even slipping, Often that's just because the weather's changing, humidity's changing, and the pegs move around, and you just need to push in a bit more. But sometimes you can add things to the pegs to make them turn a little bit more nicely. So my G right now, I feel like is a little sticky. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this Hydrazine paste. I've had this for quite some time, and it works fairly well. My favorite is the Hill peg compound, which I will put a link in the description so you can find that. My old teacher used to just use chalk. And what you want to do, if it's sticking, you'll have to take the peg out. You could just loosen it a little bit and pull out slightly and add some to here, but I would prefer to add some on the entire end. So we're going to take the string off. If you have not watched my video on how to restring an instrument, check that out. I'll put that in the description because that will be needed to put the string back on. And all you need to do is with the peg compound is put a couple lines on it. The Hill compound's really nice because it kind of is set up like chapstick or lipstick, and you don't need to hold this giant block of it. And that's it. That's all you have to do. So then let's put the string back on. Now the string's going to have to be tuned a bit more because I just took it off, which sort of resets the elasticity of the string, but this peg is turning much more nicely now. You still have to push in when you turn. It doesn't make it where it just sticks into place, but it definitely turns much more nicely now. And again, just like I go over in the video with tuning, make sure you always check the bridge so it's not pulling towards there. Oops. Looked like my peg didn't stick, so I had to push it in a little bit more. Those are some things you can do at home or in the classroom to make sure that the instrument is set up correctly, as well as fixing some things like the chin rest, the bridge placement, or the pegs slipping. Please leave your questions down below. Let me know if there's anything you would like to see in the future. Thank you very much.